They say family dinners are supposed to be warm, full of laughter and love. But that night, as mashed potatoes grew cold and silence gripped the room, my daughter-in-law pointed her finger at me and spat out, "Get a job and stop being a leech." Everyone else just stared at their plates. That was the night I stopped swallowing their cruelty, and started plotting my revenge. Because if they thought I was a burden, they were about to find out just how heavy I could be. You know, I never expected to grow old in someone else's house. I didn't raise a family, bury a husband, and keep food on the table for 45 years just to be treated like an unwanted guest in the winter of my life. But that's exactly what happened. After my husband passed, God rest his soul, the house we built was sold. Not because I wanted to, but because my son David said it was too much for me to handle. Said it was time to simplify. What he meant was, sell the house so we can use the money. And like a fool, I agreed. I thought, okay, I'll live with them for a little while. Help with the grandkids. Cook meals, fold laundry, be useful. Useful. That word clung to me like a shadow. I cooked. I cleaned. I tucked the kids into bed. I packed lunches. I changed diapers. I stayed up with fevers. I didn't complain. But not once did I feel welcome. From day one, my daughter-in-law, Sarah, made it clear I wasn't really part of the household. My mug always went missing. My slippers accidentally thrown out. She rearranged the fridge so my yogurt ended up on the garage shelf like trash. Still, I smiled. Because I loved my son. And my grandchildren? They were the only bright spots. But that night, that dinner, everything shifted. The kids were bickering. David was on his phone. I was just passing the green beans when Sarah slammed her fork down and said, "You know what, this is ridiculous." Everyone froze. She looked directly at me, voice rising like a storm that had been brewing for months. "Why don't you do something with your life? Get a job. Stop being a leech." A leech. She called me a leech, in front of my son, my grandkids, my daughter who'd come over with her own little ones. A full table of family, and no one said a word. Just silence. The fork I was holding slipped from my hand and clinked against the plate. My face burned. My heart pounded so loud I could barely hear anything over it. I looked at my son. And do you know what he did? He adjusted his tie and kept chewing. Didn't defend me. Didn't speak up. Just chewed. Like her words were air. It was my granddaughter, little Ellie, who whispered "Grandma," as if she'd seen something crack in me. Because something did. I stood up slowly so they could all feel the weight of it, and I said in a voice I didn't even recognize as mine, "You want me gone? Fine. You won't have to say it twice." And I walked away from that table. Away from their plates and polite cruelty. Away from being invisible in a house I helped fund. I locked myself in the guest room, trembling, eyes stinging. I didn't cry. Not yet. I just packed. I took only what was mine. The photo of me and Harold on the lake. My knitting bag. A few sweaters. A worn book of poems. I didn't say goodbye. At 3 a.m., I slipped out. Took the little cash I had left. Called a cab. And left. Now let me be clear, I didn't have a plan. I didn't have some secret savings account or a long-lost mansion waiting for me. I had a debit card with about $1,100, a suitcase of cardigans, and a heart full of fire. That was all. The cab driver asked where I was headed. I told him the truth. I'm not sure yet, but it's going to be somewhere I'm respected. I spent that first night at a 24-hour diner. Ordered a coffee, black. No cream, no sugar. Sat by the window and stared at the darkness outside, wondering if I'd lost my mind. But it wasn't madness. It was something sharper. Something truer. It was freedom. The waitress, maybe 19, with a pink streak in her ponytail, noticed my suitcase. "Everything okay, ma'am?" she asked. And that did it. I burst into tears, ugly ones, loud ones, the kind you only cry when years of quiet pain finally rupture. She sat beside me in the booth and just let me cry. "I'm not a leech," I finally whispered. She nodded like she believed me. That night, she called her aunt who ran a boarding house. They had a tiny room open. No frills. Just a bed, a heater, and 4 walls. I took it. I lived off oatmeal and canned soup for the first week. Knitted scarves and sold them on Facebook Marketplace. I didn't even know how to use the app, had to ask a neighbor's son to help set it up. But every stitch I made felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Each scarf sold gave me $10 and a jolt of pride. Within 3 weeks, I had 43 orders. Word was spreading. People loved the designs. Someone tagged me on Instagram, calling it handmade magic by someone's fierce grandma. They didn't know how right they were. Because with every scarf, I was building something bigger than revenge. I was building a return. I started writing too. Journaling every memory Sarah tried to erase. Every story David forgot. I turned them into short essays. Posted them online. A blog called The Leech's Diary. The name was my idea, because if they wanted to call me a leech, I'd show them how much life this parasite had left. And the internet listened. People began following, commenting, sharing. Women my age, and younger, said I made them feel seen. Some even mailed me yarn from other states just to keep me going. One comment said, "You're the grandmother I never had. Keep speaking." It lit something inside me. A purpose I didn't know I still had. The woman they tried to reduce to an extra mouth at dinner? She was becoming a name, a voice, a movement. And while they weren't watching me anymore, I was watching them, waiting. Because I knew. One day, they'd come looking. Not out of guilt, no, that would be too kind. But out of need. And when they did, well, let's just say I had something special planned for that day. Because I was done being quiet. And I wasn't coming back as their guest. I was coming back as the storm. You'd be surprised how loud the internet can be, especially when someone underestimated finally starts speaking. Within a month, The Leech's Diary had a few thousand followers. Nothing world-shaking, but for someone who couldn't work a touchscreen just a few weeks earlier, it felt like a revolution. I shared stories they never bothered to ask me about, how I worked double shifts at the diner so David could go to college, how I sold my wedding band to cover his medical bills after that bike accident, how I'd once stood in a snowstorm for 4 hours because I forgot my house key and didn't want to inconvenience Sarah by calling her early. People commented with heartbreak and rage. "This isn't just your story," one woman wrote. "It's mine too." That line stuck with me. It wasn't just about me anymore. One post, the one about the dinner, the shouting, the silence, went viral. Over 70,000 shares. A radio station even quoted me on air. I wasn't a leech. I was their roots. I stared at my little cracked phone screen and just laughed. Not bitter, but full. For the first time in years, I wasn't fading. And then, the email came. From a podcast producer. A young woman named Julia who said, "I want your story. All of it. In your own voice. No edits, no filters." I was terrified. But I said yes. They sent me a mic in a box with a guide labeled, "For Grandmas Who Don't Podcast." I recorded my first episode with my blanket pulled tight around my shoulders, hands shaking. I told the story of my wedding day. Then the birth of my son. Then the long stretch of life where I gave and gave until I couldn't remember when I last received anything without guilt. When I played it back, I barely recognized the voice. But it was mine. And it was strong. Episode 1 got 400 listens. Then 4,000. Then 44,000. Apparently, the world was ready for the voice they'd always dismissed. A local newspaper picked it up. And that's when things got interesting. Because David's coworker, someone from his tech firm, recognized the story. Apparently, he put it together fast. Between the city, the name David, and a few details I left in accidentally, it was enough. I got an email from him too. Not my son. The coworker. It read, "Hey. Just wanted to say. I work with your son. I always wondered what kind of man raised someone like him. Now I know. You're remarkable." I didn't reply. But I saved it. Because David had no idea yet. But the walls were getting closer. I kept recording. People sent in questions. How do you stay strong? What would you say to your family if you saw them now? What's the worst betrayal you've ever forgiven? Forgiven. That one made me pause. I thought back to that night. The heat in my chest. The silence from my own son. No. I hadn't forgiven. Not yet. And I didn't plan to. But I had something better in mind. Because now, people were listening. And when you have an audience, you have power. And I was just getting started. One night, just past midnight, I got a message from a name I hadn't seen in years. Emily R. My niece. We hadn't spoken since Harold's funeral, mostly because my side of the family scattered after the inheritance drama. But her message? It was short. I think you're brilliant. If you ever want help growing this. I work in publishing. That's when the spark ignited. A book. Not just a blog. Not just a podcast. A book. A permanent record. My story, our stories, bound in ink and truth. Something they couldn't erase. I called her the next morning. Her voice was kind. Familiar. Like wind chimes in spring. We spent 2 hours on the phone. She laid it all out, how to shape the blog posts into chapters, how to pitch it, how to own my story in a way that made the world lean in. I want this to go somewhere big, I told her. It will, she promised. You've got the voice. Now we'll give it the volume. We worked through the winter. Every day, I walked to the library with my second-hand laptop tucked under my arm, scarf pulled high against the cold, boots crunching on salted sidewalks. I'd sit in the back corner, next to the outlet that barely worked, and type. Chapter by chapter. Memory by memory. Pain, stitched into paragraphs. It was exhausting. And healing. Some chapters made me laugh. Others made me close the screen and walk outside just to breathe. But it was mine. All mine. By spring, we had a full draft. The title? Dinner was served, and so was I. The subtitle? A grandmother's story of family, silence, and finding her voice. Publishers fought over it. We signed with a major house in New York. They sent an advance. More money than I'd seen in a decade. And they scheduled the release for fall, right before the holidays. Poetic, isn't it? Because I knew exactly what was coming. And who would see it. You see, David didn't know I was still in the city. He didn't know that the leech was now a paid author, a podcast host, a keynote speaker for a women's conference in Chicago. He didn't know the newspaper that quoted me was the same one he read every Sunday. But soon? He'd know everything. Because one day, I got a call from the local news station. They wanted to feature me in their Voices of the City segment. A 4-minute spotlight on a resident making change. They'd heard my podcast. Loved the book title. I asked when it would air. They said, this Sunday night. Prime time. I smiled. Because I knew where David would be. Sarah's mother was flying in. Big roast dinner planned. Family all gathered. Television always on, muted during meals. Muted, but not blind. He'd see my face. Right there. On the screen. And right beside me? The book cover. My name. My words. My story. The one they tried to silence. The one they pushed out the door with a suitcase full of sweaters and shame. I wasn't just coming back. I was arriving. It starts with a text. From a neighbor, apparently. Or maybe a coworker. David never tells me which. All I know is this: on that Sunday night, just as the mashed potatoes hit the table and someone cracked a joke about cranberry sauce being overrated, David looks up at the muted television. And there I am. Hair curled. Burgundy scarf. Calm eyes, soft voice, captured on camera as I speak from a cozy studio downtown. The camera pans to my book. The headline reads, Local Grandmother's Podcast Becomes Bestseller, A Story of Silence and Strength. David drops his fork. Sarah freezes mid-bite. Even their youngest, the one who barely knows my name, looks between them like, what did I just miss? David stares at the screen. His face flushes in slow, rising panic. Sarah whispers, is that? He doesn't answer. Because the answer is yes. It's me. It always was. That Monday, I don't hear from them. Not a call. Not an email. Not a knock on my apartment door. But I know they're spiraling. Because on Tuesday morning, the local bookstore announces an author signing event. And guess whose name is printed on the glossy poster taped to their front window? Mine. By Wednesday, 3 of David's friends, old ones, the kind who knew me back when I still picked him up from Little League, send me messages. Things like, "I'm so sorry, I never knew. You raised a good man. I hope he remembers it. They treated you like a burden, but you carried everything. I don't cry. Not because it doesn't matter, but because I'm finally being seen." And when Saturday arrives, so does the storm. The book event draws a small crowd at first. Just a handful of readers and some curious locals. But within an hour, the line is out the door. One woman tells me, "Your chapter about being invisible? That's what my mother lived through. Thank you." Another says, "I played your podcast for my daughter. She cried. She called her grandma the same night." And then, the front door opens again. I glance up, ready to smile. But my lips stiffen. It's David. He walks in slow, eyes darting around like he's still deciding if he's going to make a scene or not. He doesn't come to the table. Just lingers near the back of the line like a lost tourist. I keep signing books. Smiling. Listening. After 15 minutes, the line thins. And he steps forward. His face looks paler than I remember. He tries to speak, but I cut in first. "Would you like a signed copy?" His mouth opens, then closes. "Mom. I'm signing for readers today, not family." I say it gently, but everyone hears. David's ears turn bright red. The bookstore owner, a kind young man named Marcus, steps in. "Everything okay here?" he asks. David swallows. "Yeah. Just wanted to talk." Marcus smiles. That's what book signings are for. Want her to personalize it. David hesitates. Then quietly he says, "Sure." I take the book. And I write. "To the son who forgot where he came from, this is who raised you. M." I close it and hand it to him. His fingers tremble as he takes it. Then he leaves. Not another word. Not even a thank you. That night, I go home. I brew myself a cup of tea. I light the little candle my neighbor gave me, lavender and vanilla, and I sit on the couch with a warm blanket across my legs. And for the first time in a long time, I feel peace. But the story doesn't end there. Because a few days later, I get an invitation in the mail. From a major talk show. Not the kind with gossip or gimmicks, the kind with real conversations. Books. Women with sharp minds and stronger hearts. They want me. An entire segment, rediscovering voice after silence. I fly out 2 weeks later. The hotel they put me in is nicer than anything I've ever stayed in. White robes. Free coffee. A view of the skyline that twinkles like stars on Earth. I press my forehead to the cold glass and whisper, "You did this." Not to anyone else. Just to myself. The show records the next morning. The set is warm and bright. The host hugs me like we've known each other forever. The cameras roll. And I speak. Not just about the dinner. Not just about the insult. But about years of slow erasure. The way silence doesn't always scream, it sometimes whispers so long you forget it's not supposed to be there. And I talk about finding my voice again. About choosing to be loud. The episode airs 2 days later. It hits millions of views within a week. People send letters. Emails. Flowers. And not long after that, the publisher calls. They want a second book. Not just stories, advice. Lessons. Strength passed forward. They ask what I want to call it. I say, without hesitation, The Leech's Legacy. Because if that's what they called me, then I'll show them what a leech can build when she stops feeding others and starts feeding herself. And just when I think the wave is quieting, a letter arrives. Handwritten. From Sarah. The envelope is cream-colored, expensive. Inside? 4 lines. I owe you an apology. Not just for dinner. But for every time I looked at you and chose ignorance over gratitude. You deserved better. I don't expect forgiveness. But I hope you keep thriving. It's not dramatic. Not overly emotional. But for Sarah, it's an earthquake. I fold the letter, place it in a small wooden box I keep by the window, and watch the sunlight land across its lid. I'm not sure I'll ever call her again. Or David. Some things, when broken, don't need mending, they need replacing. But I will say this. When they see me now, they don't see a leech. They see a woman who rose from silence and broadcasted every painful truth they tried to bury. It's funny what people decide is too much, until the world tells them it's exactly what it needed. That's how the emails start coming in. Quiet at first. Just one or two. Then dozens. Then hundreds. Women. Men. Even teenagers. All writing some version of, "Your voice gave me the courage to speak." Some are caretakers who've been forgotten. Some are daughters trying to reconcile with their own mothers. Some are people who haven't seen their grandparents in years but suddenly feel the urge to call. And some are just like me, pushed out of their own families, labeled as burdens, ghosts in their own homes. I spend days replying, late into the night, typing carefully, personally. Because if they're brave enough to write, I can be brave enough to answer. And that's when a producer from a national radio network calls. She wants to syndicate my podcast. Wants it to reach more people. Wants me to consider doing a live Q&A tour. At 75 years old. I laugh when she first says it, thinking it's a joke. But she's serious. They'll handle the booking, the press, the promotion. All I have to do is speak. For the first time in my life, I hire a lawyer. I hire a manager. And for once, not a single person talks over me. Not in meetings. Not in negotiations. Not even in the interviews. Because now, when I walk into a room, people stop to listen. It's not just about revenge anymore. It's about visibility. One night, after a panel event in Boston, a woman in her 50s comes up to me, eyes shining with tears. She says, "My kids said I was overreacting when I cried after my mom moved out. But I just kept thinking, why didn't we do better by her? I heard your episode on invisible mothers, and I finally understood. Thank you." I hug her. Not out of obligation, but because in that moment, we are mirrors for each other. Still, not everyone is thrilled. David tries to save face. He posts a photo of us from 5 years ago on social media, cropped tightly, the caption reading, "Proud of mom for chasing her dreams." I don't comment. But I don't let it slide either. In my next podcast episode, I say, support is only real when it's inconvenient. Don't let anyone claim your victories if they weren't there during the battles. The clip goes viral. Again. I get invited to do a TED Talk. They want me to talk about ageism. About silencing in families. About weaponized respect and what it means when people say, "Know your place." I title the talk, "This is my place." Standing on that red in front of a full auditorium, with stage lights warming my face and silence hanging in anticipation, I feel more alive than I ever did at any of those family dinners. I start the talk with something simple. I was told I was taking up space. So I made room for myself, and a few million others while I was at it. The applause at the end shakes the room. My inbox crashes the next morning. Publishers, agents, advocates, survivors, strangers. One message stays with me. It's from a teenage boy. He writes, "My grandma raised me until my parents came back into the picture. Then they told me to forget her. But I never did. Your words made me realize I don't have to choose between love and loyalty. I'm going to find her." I cry when I read it. Not because I'm sad, but because healing is contagious. And my little story, born from a table where I wasn't respected, is now restoring tables across the country. But life has a way of circling back. One crisp fall afternoon, while I'm walking through the park, enjoying the red leaves fluttering down from the trees, my phone rings. It's a number I recognize but haven't saved. David. I consider ignoring it. But curiosity wins. "Hello." There's silence at first. Then a shaky voice, "Hi, Mom." I don't say anything. He continues. "I saw your TED Talk. All of it." Still, I say nothing. Sarah saw it too. I breathe, slow and steady. "She cried," he adds. I don't bite. Then he says, I think we owe you a public apology." Now that makes me laugh. Not kindly. Oh? And what prompted this awakening? The camera? Or the guilt? He sighs. I'm not trying to take credit for anything. I know we were wrong. I stop walking. The breeze rattles the dry leaves on the path. A nearby fountain hums quietly. He continues, would you consider coming to the house for dinner? Not like before. I promise. No cameras. I ask. No cameras, he replies. I think for a long moment. All right, I say finally. But this time, I'm not coming empty-handed. That Saturday, I arrive in a deep green cardigan, black slacks, and flats that don't hurt my feet. My hair is pinned back neatly. I bring a tray of lemon bars, the ones I used to make when David was a child, before Sarah said they were too sugary. They've set the table nicely this time. No plastic forks. No TV playing in the background. No snide comments. Just awkward smiles and stiff napkins. When we sit, Sarah clears her throat. I read the second book, she says. Especially the chapter on performative apologies. I glance at her. She's nervous. Good. Do you believe in redemption? She asks. I look her square in the eyes. Only if it doesn't ask the wounded to pretend the past didn't hurt. She nods, slowly. That night goes, okay. Not warm. Not intimate. But respectful. They've learned to fear my voice now. Which is better than being ignored. But I don't stay for dessert. Instead, I stand before they bring out the pie and say, thank you for dinner. And for finally offering me a seat. But I've built my own table now, and it's a lot fuller than this one ever was. Then I walk out. Not angry. Not dramatic. Just done. Because I've learned, power doesn't always come from revenge. Sometimes, it comes from walking away and taking your story with you. You'd think that would be the end of it, right? That dinner. That apology. That quiet walkout. But when your voice finally grows teeth, when your truth no longer fits in the polite corners they tried to keep you in, people don't just let it go. They try to reframe it. Reclaim it. Repurpose it. And that's exactly what David tries to do. A week after that dinner, I get tagged in a photo on social media. It's me. Sitting at the family table that night. Holding a lemon bar. Caught mid-laugh, probably from something the baby said, not them. The caption reads, so grateful we could reconnect. Family is everything. I stare at the screen, breath caught. The comments are flooded with likes. Heart emojis. Fake support. But I know what this is. Damage control. They want to rewrite the story, make it look like I was never pushed out, never humiliated, never called a leech in front of a dozen people and a pot roast. They want to act like they reached out. They made peace. They brought the family together. But here's the thing, you don't get to erase the truth just because it's inconvenient now. So I post a photo of my own. It's of my living room, cozy, sunlit, filled with plants and books and my favorite rocking chair in the corner. My new home. No family in sight. The caption? They offered me a seat at their table again. But I'd already built my own, and it has a waiting list. That post gets 240,000 likes in 12 hours. The next day, I get a call from a streaming platform. They want to produce a docuseries about older women reclaiming their lives, and they want me as the opening episode. I don't even hesitate. We film over 3 months. They follow me to podcast tapings, community events, book signings, and quiet mornings where I sip tea and answer emails from strangers who somehow feel like family. They interview people who've been touched by my story, a librarian who started an Invisible Voices reading group for seniors. A retirement home in Oregon that now has a weekly truth circle for residents to share the stories they've been told to bury. A high schooler who used my podcast in a debate competition about intergenerational respect. It's surreal. One afternoon, the director asks me to sit on a bench in the park and talk about that dinner. The dinner where Sarah called me a leech. I stare at the leaves. I take a breath. Then I say, you know, that night broke something in me. But sometimes, broken things leak light. And I stopped trying to fix their version of me. I started telling my own. That clip ends up being used in the trailer. And when the series finally premieres, titled Unmuted, it crashes the site in the first 2 hours. People call it raw, brave, uncomfortable. Some call me a hero. Some say I'm just bitter. I don't care. Because for once, I'm not being edited. Then something unexpected happens. My former daughter-in-law, Sarah, writes a column for a parenting magazine. She titles it, "When You Realize You Were the Problem." It goes viral, too. She talks about inherited cruelty. About how women are taught to fear aging, to isolate power, to mock the softness they've been told to suppress in themselves. She doesn't name me directly. But she doesn't need to. The apology is in the details. Especially when she writes, "The worst thing I ever did was mistake the silence of someone older for uselessness, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life." I sit with that sentence a long time. I don't cry. Not anymore. But I do feel something shift. And then I get another call. From a university. They want me to give the keynote speech at their Intergenerational Justice Summit. And this time, I don't just speak from a stage. I take them through it, through the betrayal, the exclusion, the moment I broke, and the moment I built again. I tell the students, you're going to get old too one day. The question is, will you inherit their silence, or our fire? That speech ends with a standing ovation. I stay late, chatting with students, some of them crying, some hugging me like I'm their own grandmother. I don't mind. Because for every person who pushed me away, I've found 100 who pull me in now. And just when I think I've seen it all, one final thing happens. A publishing house offers me a memoir deal. They want it raw, unfiltered. They want the real story, the dinners, the podcast, the pain, the rebuilding, the public silence and the viral thunderstorm that followed. The title I choose? The Leech Who Bloomed. They love it. I write it in 6 weeks. And when it finally hits shelves, no ghostwriter, no filters, just me, it hits the bestseller list in 2 days. David texts me when he sees the announcement. I read it, he writes. I didn't know how bad it really was. I'm sorry. I don't reply. Instead, I take a photo of the book in my hand, sitting at a local cafe, next to a plate of lemon bars. I post it with the caption, "From a whispered insult to a printed truth." I kept the receipts, and now they're on sale in hardcover. The first time I walk into a bookstore and see my face on the cover of a hardcover book, I stop breathing. Not because I'm shocked. No, that part passed long ago. But because I remember how many years I lived without being seen at all. The book is right there, front table, eye level, next to memoirs by politicians and celebrities. The Leech Who Bloomed in thick white letters over a photo of me sitting in my rocking chair, notebook in hand, with a stare that dares the reader to underestimate me. A young girl nearby, maybe 16, picks it up, flips through a few pages, and lets out a small gasp. Then she looks up at me. Looks back down at the book. "You're her," she whispers. I smile. "Yes, I am." She doesn't say anything for a moment. Then she asks, "Did it hurt? When they said those things to you?" I think for a moment. Yes. But not as much as staying quiet would've. She buys the book and asks me to sign it. Right there. In blue pen. To the girl who listens. And never forgets. That moment stays with me. Because I realize, I'm not just telling my story anymore. I'm giving others permission to tell theirs. After the book release, my schedule turns into something I couldn't have dreamed of a year ago. Speaking engagements. Book club interviews. Panel discussions on aging, truth-telling, and the cruelty of being dismissed. But the one invitation that floors me? It's from David. He calls. I answer, even though I don't owe him that anymore. His voice is soft. Too soft, for someone who once watched me get humiliated and didn't say a word. "Mom," he says. "I know you're busy, but we're doing a big family brunch this Sunday. For the twins' birthday. I'd really like you to come." I'm silent. I know I haven't earned it, he adds quickly. And I know it might be too soon. But they miss you. We all do. I take a breath. "You didn't stand up for me," I say. "You let her call me a leech. In front of everyone." "I know," he says. "And I'll regret it for the rest of my life." He sounds older. Like life finally caught up to him. Like he finally understands that neutrality in betrayal is just cowardice with better manners. "I'll think about it," I say. And I do. I sit with it for days. I even pull out the old notebook. The one I used to jot down recipes, then turned into a vault of pain and plans. I flipped to the last entry, written the night before I walked out of that house. One day, they'll invite you back. Not because they changed, but because the world heard your side. I laugh quietly. That day came faster than I expected. On Sunday morning, I dress carefully. Silver gray bobbed hair freshly curled. Soft pink cardigan, cream blouse underneath. Beige slacks. Orthopedic shoes, stylish, but comfortable. I'm not showing up to impress them. I'm showing up because I can. But just before I leave, I do one more thing. I tuck a sealed envelope into my purse. It's a copy of my will. Not to be morbid, but to be clear. Because if they want to pretend we're a family again, they need to know exactly what legacy I'm leaving behind, and what I'm not. When I arrive, the door opens before I can knock. It's Sarah. For a moment, we just look at each other. She's wearing an apron. Her hair's pulled back. There's a stain of chocolate frosting on her cheek. She doesn't try to wipe it off. I read your book, she says. I know. She nods slowly. You made me the villain. I raise an eyebrow. Did I? Or did you just not like how the mirror looked? She bites her lip. Looks like she might cry. But she doesn't. I deserved it, she finally whispers. I nod. Yes. You did. Then she steps aside and lets me in. The house hasn't changed. Same table. Same chairs. Same big family energy, loud, messy, beautiful when it's kind. Dangerous when it's not. The grandkids come running toward me, arms wide. One of them, the youngest, holds up my book like it's treasure. Did you really say that in front of everybody? She asks, eyes sparkling. I laugh. I did. The brunch is surprisingly calm. No biting comments. No passive aggression. Just awkward attempts at small talk, and a lot of eggs. I excuse myself early. As I head toward the door, David walks me out. Thanks for coming, he says. It meant a lot. I hand him the envelope. What's this? My will, I say. So there's no confusion when the time comes. He looks startled. I explain calmly, everything I've built, the podcast, the book, the royalties, the licensing rights, is going to foundations that support elder voices. Women who've been silenced. Seniors who've been displaced or humiliated. That money doesn't stay here. He stares at me. I place a hand on his arm. I forgave you, David. But forgiveness doesn't come with inheritance. Then I step into the sunlight. Outside, the air is crisp and sweet. I don't go home. I go straight to a community center, where I'm mentoring a group of retired women who are writing their own stories now. One of them looks up and asks, how'd it go? Did the brunch feel like closure? I smile. It felt like a footnote. They nod. They understand. That night, I get hundreds of messages on my author page, all from women saying thank you. For showing them they weren't alone. That the ache they felt had a name. That survival wasn't the end, justice was. And that's when I realized something. They tried to shame me for needing them. But in the end, they needed me. My silence gave them control. But my story? My story gave me everything.